Hello everyone! Angular v22 was announced recently, and we at Web Vibes Only are back with all the exciting updates, especially the ones that we cannot wait to show you. I'm Ankita, and like always, we have Kyler Johnson with us. How's it going, Kyler?
It's going great. I'm super excited about what we're talking about.
I know. This is kind of a big release because a lot of things are stable that people have been waiting for, seems like forever, even though it's fairly new. The biggest things were ever since signals have been a part of Angular's ecosystem, were then naturally signal forms. And with v22, signal forms are officially, finally, forever stable. And not just signal forms are stable, we have all the resource APIs, httpResource, rxResource, and just resource, like all the asynchronous signal APIs are also stable, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's a lot of people excited about some of the features that were marked stable. It's absolutely a major release, milestone type release.
Yeah, I think there were so many people who were just anxiously waiting, and that's the reason why the v22 version was released this time, first week of June, although historically it's been somewhere end of May, but the team wanted to do their due diligence, make sure everything is ready to be stable before they ship their release, and they delivered, and we cannot be more excited about it. So if you haven't tried any of either the resource APIs or signal forms, I don't know what you're waiting for, because you gotta check them out today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the next big thing in Angular version 22 are the changes to change detection. I didn't think that Angular team would prioritize that, even though it was a given. One of the main things anyone would ever say whenever it came to talking about performance in Angular was like to make sure to mark your component's change detection strategy to be change detection.onPush. That was probably one of the most frequently asked interview questions, or at least an answer that someone would expect when someone would ask the candidate about performance improvements that you can make. It was also like one of those, like, you gotta have a track ID for your for loops, you gotta have change detection on push. It often was wondered why is not the default, because default was something else. Like default, we had a default, it was change detection default, and on push was not the default. But now on push is now the new default for all new applications, which is super exciting.
It is. With their signal implementation to go to on push change detection, the performance implications and benefits for that are insane. So if anyone out there is writing Angular code and you're not using signals and on push change detection, you're missing out on a huge performance gain there.
Yeah, and I mean, the implications are vast with just having that to be the default. It's no longer on the developer or the developer's agent to remember to mark everything on push. And then your component metadata is so tiny because you don't have that one line. And that if it's a routed component and it's not a child component, you don't need a selector, you don't need styles, you just mention like the template or just the two URLs and you're good. You don't need to have so many things, which I know also used to be one of the things that someone who is new to Angular would get confused about all this metadata and what it really implied, because it's different from how other frameworks are, or other frameworks components are structured generally. So it used to be a learning curve to even understand what all of these mean and what all of these signify. So the biggest change to change detection with onPush being the default, what does it mean for the old default? Well, now it's called change detection strategy.eager instead of change detection strategy.default. So whenever you do upgrade to the new version, you'll see all of those changes and all of those components, which can be a bit jarring, but that's on you because you are still using default and not on push. It's definitely a great change and something that we love about Angular. It takes care about their performance improvements without it being on the developer to have to focus on that. That Angular takes care of performance improvements of the app. So I think that's a great win.
Absolutely.
There's like so much happening in this agentic era. Every framework is evolving and JavaScript is evolving. The way we code is evolving. I know the biggest buzzword in this agentic era that we live right now are WebMCPs. Angular is the first major framework to officially offer framework level support for WebMCP, which kind of shows you how focused the Angular team is in delivering what the builders need right now in this agentic era with everything, all things AI. And that's actually pretty awesome that they're focusing on enhancing the developer experience from all ends with all perspectives in mind, and focusing really on how can Angular be the best framework in this agentic era to support all their builders' needs. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to try out. If you haven't done that already, I would highly recommend if you go to the angular.dev/AI, which is where everything, all the documentation lives with build with AI. You can look at all the documentation and examples that the team has added and has been building and is still building about just best practices for Angular and AI, but all the different things that you can do. And there's a whole new page just about WebMCP. And of course, WebMCP itself is experimental and it's still evolving. So it's just, even though it's experimental, Angular is willing to support it and provide experimental WebMCP tools that you can add to your app config and just use it in that aspect. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of where we're starting to see so many of Angular's great changes come into play. It's so easy to use Angular's dependency injection to inject whatever service you need here. And you have full access in your WebMCP tool configuration.
Yeah.
Right there in the example they give you. You know, we're really starting to see the benefits of a lot of the changes they've made over the last few versions. And you know, I'm really excited to see where this WebMCP tool thing goes, because the user experience enhancements that you can do with this are next gen, like truly next gen.
For real. Yeah, it cannot get more convenient or more easy than what we have today with all of this. They've added more tools to the MCP server to be able to have your server running, and so that there's this automatic feedback loop for your agent that it runs the build and it sees if there are any build errors and it fixes them automatically without you having to execute any of those steps. So yeah, lots of cool stuff, lots of helpful stuff for when you're coding with your agents to be able to try all of these things out and see what are the endless opportunities that you have with this. It's pretty awesome. Okay, so the last two things that we want to share that we're very excited about, I think they're such small but great wins for your app, are injectasync, which is this way of lazy loading your services, and debounce signal. It was confusing at first that you would have to use toObservable to be able to pipe it, and then use toSignal just to be able to add some debounce time and filters and all of those RxJS operators. The debounce signal brings you one step closer to not having to use the Rx operators just for reactivity, and just to be able to use signal all the way through for all your reactive needs.
Yeah, and just a quick note for those who are not in the RxJS world, that might not be Angular developers watching this. Yeah, we can use set timeout, but we try to avoid that in Angular because Angular's change detection, without getting too long-winded about it, Angular monkey patches set timeout and it triggers a change detection check. And we don't want to do that unnecessarily. So we try to avoid set timeout in Angular because with RxJS, historically, it's just not necessary.
Yeah, that's a great point. So in this example, you just inject the service, and I'm just using it using resource. That's the search service because I need it to be available right away. I could have used inject async and then called it as the user is typing. But I mean, I don't know if that's such a great win. It's like while using defer for components, you don't want to defer each and every component. Just like with defer for components, if you use inject async for a service, it won't be part of your main bundle and it will load later on the network request, whatever triggers it. But then if you have a search field, you kind of already know that the user is going to use it for search. I would say choose wisely whether a service should be injected versus injected asynchronously. But for this service, because it's a search field, you want to be able to debounce it. And so you just enter, I've given a very long number just to be able to show it in the UI how this works and how it doesn't, this API call or whatever the service call is not triggered at every keystroke because it's debounced, and the debounced query is what is getting fed back to results, and that's what is being loaded in the value. Let's see what that looks like. So for example, I'm just gonna go here to the console because I'm console logging what I'm typing just to be able to say, so suppose I start typing my name and I'm like, no, actually I want to search for Angular. And you see that the call was only made for Angular and not for every keystroke and not for what I had initially typed. So if I like accidentally type something and I'm like, no, actually I only want to search for what I came here to search for. Or sometimes like while I'm typing, I make silly mistakes. Like instead of signal, I'll make a spelling mistake and then write signal. But if I'm, I didn't delete backspace it fast enough because I was talking. But actually, often I find myself correcting my own spelling for signal. So it's just to save you a keystroke or a round trip with your service as you're typing, and just show you the values of what this user actually wants to search, all without having to use RxJS and just sticking to signals. Okay, and for the next example, we have this editor, this markdown editor, that gets called using inject. That's the biggest use case for it, that you only want to lazy load the service when the user clicks on the button, but not on the app load or whenever the component is loading. And one key thing to note here is that that service either needs to use the new service decorator, or it needs to be, if you're using the injectable provided in root.
Yeah, so the injectable decorator allows you to set the scope of it, whether it's going to be a singleton or whether everything in the app's going to get the one instance of the service versus whether or not you want to provide it at a local level or even a platform level if you're if you're doing module federation. If you're federating things in and stuff like that, then you can provide your service and platform and everything will get that same instance of the service, even your federated modules. But with service, you don't have to worry about any of that. Your service says, hey, this is a global service. And this is something you're going to want for a lot of your like API services.
Yeah, thankfully, the Angular team has documented when to use service versus injectable. One of the biggest differences that I just remembered is that service only works with the inject function. You can't use it in the constructor, like how you used to be able to use the injectable in the constructor, which I think makes sense, and it more aligns in the direction where Angular is headed with function-based things, etc. Anyways, just to show you a quick example, so if we head over to the network tab, you will see that we have the main bundle and we have the markdown service being loaded separately. It's not part of the main bundle. And the way this is being done, if you go to the component, you see prefetch on idle. So it's prefetching the service. But if you remove that and then you hit refresh again, you'll see that it's no longer here and it's not part of the main bundle. You don't see the markdown service anywhere unless you click on the button, and that's when the service gets injected and that's when it gets called when you actually need it. So I think it's a great performance improvement, and there's so many endless capabilities that this feature provides for you to be able to improve on what your app can do.
Yeah, I'm thinking of time that I've added heavy analytics providers like Google Analytics, and like when your app loads, you kind of see, once you introduce that, you kind of see a noticeable decrease in load time. So like this is going to be one of those things that really helps with that.
For just like initial page load time, it will be so fast and snappy if you're not having to load all these either external or even internal heavy services. Some legacy code bases can have really chunky services that the user may or may not end up using. So this is a very small example of this anyways. Okay. Well, those are all the things that we're super excited about in version 22, and we couldn't wait to share with you guys. I hope you found this helpful. One thing that cracks me up about this version is the number of blogs or LinkedIn posts or whatever that I'm seeing that are convinced that selectorless components are a thing in this version. They absolutely are not. It's not even on the Angular team's priority list to make selectorless components a thing. But stay from all those AI generated posts out there, people, and don't believe everything you see or read on the internet. But trust us that this was all verified. That's why we also had a demo and we were showing all the official documents. So just trust the official release notes and the documents for now, I guess. And trust us.
Also, please comment below if you know why AI is so convinced when it writes articles that this
I
is there,
know.
but when you use AI on your actual Angular application, it knows that it's not. So
Right. Yeah, it's crazy how all these content creators who are using AI are just convincing everyone that stateless components are a thing, even though it's not.
yeah,
Also, leave us a note of any demo or any of the fun things that you've tried ever since the new version has come out that you're super excited about. I think this is yet another great release, a successful release with the Angular team, and we're super excited about it. Okay, until next time, take care, everyone. See ya.